Congressman Jim Cooper is a Democrat from a red state. He represents the area around Nashville. He's a member of the Blue Dog Coalition in Congress, which is a group of centrist Democrats. So when someone like Congressman Jim Cooper sounds the alarm about something, it's probably worth listening. And Congressman Cooper is sounding the alarm about the need for federal voting rights legislation. In an op-ed out today, he writes that ever since Richard Nixon and the so-called Southern Strategy, the Republican Party has worked to pass laws that effectively suppress the vote of almost everyone except older, whiter voters. He writes, quote, "Today the Republican Party is in danger of becoming the white supremacist party when so many Republicans use Trump-inspired hate speech to undermine our independent judiciary and stretch our laws to the breaking point in order to make voting harder, not easier." Joining me now is Tennessee Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman Cooper, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Great to be with you, Zerlina.
So what's going on in the Tennessee legislature that compelled you to write this? What restrictions are Republicans in your state pushing?
In our state, they've not only tried to suppress the vote, they've actually attacked our independent judiciary. They've established a separate and probably unconstitutional court system to prevent people from challenging these unconstitutional laws. It's crazy that they would attack our own judiciary to do this, but that's just what they've done.
So your state ranks 48th in the country when it comes to the ease of voting. And we've been talking a lot about states like Texas, which have a lot of barriers up and are already difficult in terms of trying to access the ballot. Why is it so difficult to vote in Tennessee?
You know, Zerlina, just about 20 years ago, we were the 10th easiest state to vote in, and now we're one of the hardest. And what you're seeing is this is the Southern strategy playing out all over again. As I pointed out in the article, it dates back to Richard Nixon. But now they're doing it more vigorously than ever. And it's a Trump big lie. You tagged it early on in your show. You're exactly right. It's just so sad to see so many people fooled by this. And the easiest way to understand it is this way. Look how easy it is to shop in America. And there's no constitutional right to shop in the Constitution. There is a right to vote. And we've got to make it as easy to vote as it is to shop. Because with shopping, you can pull out your credit card. It's done instantly. You buy your groceries. You take them home. And we make it so darn hard to vote. It's really ridiculous. And of course, the target is minorities, young people, and people of color.
Absolutely. In terms of the suppression is targeted to certain communities, and all of the research shows that those are the groups that are the most impacted. One of the things you said straight up, and I appreciate the candor, the Republican Party is in danger of becoming the white supremacist party. Do you think the Republican voters in your own state see that shift happening? I mean, you know, moderate Republicans aren't necessarily along for the ride when it comes to, you know, the people that participated in the insurrection.
Well, you know, Trump has really brainwashed the party, and it's sad that so many otherwise good people have drunk that Kool-Aid. And part of it is the information deficit. They don't really know what to believe or who to believe or where to turn. And these are not bad people in and of themselves, but they have turned angry, and they've followed the big lie for too long. And sometimes they get so dug in, they don't want to publicly change their minds. And, you know, I hope the new court system they set up will be a bridge too far. I hope that'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because this is completely outrageous to attack our judges who are democratically elected. The particular judge they're aiming at in Tennessee is actually a Republican. But you're seeing the crucifixion of Liz Cheney in Washington, D.C. You know, she's one of the most conservative people in America, but she's telling the truth. And Republicans can't stand that. If they can't wake up and listen to a Liz Cheney, then the whole party's in trouble.
How would the For the People Act prevent some of the changes we're seeing in Tennessee from becoming law? We just spoke to Secretary of State Katie Hobbs about the federal legislation and how it would impact what they're passing or trying to pass in Arizona and elsewhere. But how would it impact Tennessee? What are some of the things that it would prevent from happening?
The For the People Act would be really helpful, not only for Tennessee, but all the states. In fact, I view it as essential legislation. I voted for it twice in the last Congress and in this Congress. And I hope and pray the Senate will pass it and pass it quickly, because it would help lift the burden of these voter suppression laws. It would allow same-day voter registration. It would allow automatic voter registration. And nobody here is talking about, allowing illegal voting. We don't want that. We don't want fraudulent ballots. We want safe, clean elections. But we also want them to be easy. We want everybody to be able to access the ballot, because that should be a fundamental right in a democracy. We can't brag about democracy around the world if we're not doing it well here at home. And we're seeing systematic disenfranchisement of certain groups. For example, just young people. They go to a public university. They have a state-issued ID. That's not good enough to be able to vote. Meanwhile, you can vote with your concealed carry gun permit. Like, give me a break. We shouldn't discriminate against young people like this. That's just a small example of what Tennessee and other states have been doing. But almost all the state legislatures have been passing these cruel and anti-democratic laws just to try to get away with allowing the control of elections and of public officials by these older white voters.
One of the things that's particularly frustrating about this debate over voting rights is, well, not even a debate. The pushback against some of these bills that are popping up in the states is that they are all premised upon a lie. The lie that Donald Trump's election was stolen from him, and that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president. Is there anybody in the House on the Republican side that you see willing to stand up and tell the truth other than Liz Cheney?
They're actually a bunch, but they're mainly willing to be honest off camera. They're terrified of getting on Fox and saying this, because it's become party doctrine to follow Trump. And I'm hoping and praying the Republican Party will find its soul again. But right now they've lost their way, and they're in danger of disintegrating as a party. And to tell the truth, I probably wouldn't mind that. But I at least want them to have an honest debate, and not just to be debating the big lie. Privately in the gym, where thank goodness there aren't any cameras, you'll get actually a lot of agreement. They know that they're wrong, but they're catering to their base, so-called, and they're willing to say anything, including repeating terrible lies. It's not just me saying this, but Kevin McCarthy said this from the floor of the House, that Trump was wrong. Mitch McConnell said it from the floor of the Senate. But both of those guys have now recanted. And you saw this humbling trip of what Ted Cruz and some of these other puppets crawling to Mar-a-Lago on their knees to kiss up to Donald Trump. That's pathetic. They know he's wrong privately. They just are not willing to say that publicly.
How far sort of through the looking glass are we when you can't tell the truth? I mean, that you're actually so afraid of your base of voters that you are lying to them and telling them the truth. I mean, who are they going to vote for? So I'm actually been thinking all day about what they're actually afraid of. And it feels to me like they're afraid of the Republican base. And that can't be a healthy dynamic for a political party.
Zerlina, you're so great, because once again, you're getting to the core of the issue here. And we haven't seen something like this in America since the McCarthy era, which was even before my time. But that demagogue from Wisconsin, Joe McCarthy, he was able to persuade a vast section of America that there was a communist under every bed. People were terrified. They were finding ghosts of communists everywhere. And it almost did permanent damage to our democracy. It took years for the party to wake up. It took years for America to wake up. And even a president like Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the former commander of all our troops in World War II, and literally we trusted him with the fate of the nation. He was terrified of Joe McCarthy. Some of the older Kennedys, Joe Kennedy, Kennedy's father, got sucked into this thing. It's kind of a mass hysteria. And as I say, we haven't seen this in America since the early 50s. I hope we never see it again. But most of all, I hope we can find a cure for this hysteria right now, because these are good people who've been unfortunately fed lies, and they kind of like the taste of that lie, and they're reluctant to spit it out.
Are you optimistic that the For the People Act can become law? Is that the cure for this illness?
Well, there's so much good in the bill. Now, Fox and other outlets are trying to badmouth it, but it's a lot like Obamacare. People might have been suspicious of the title, but once they looked at the elements of Obamacare, they loved it. the elements of the For the People Act are pretty darn awesome. It's not only election reform, it's also, for example, giving our Supreme Court the first set of ethics rules they've ever had. Who knew that the highest court in the land didn't have judicial ethics? Meanwhile, every other court in the land has their own ethical guidelines. It's about election finance reform. And Lord knows we need to repeal Citizens United. That's been an outrageous decision that allowed the biggest money in the world to control our elections. It's totally wrong. There's so many great elements of this bill, and altogether, it's basically motherhood and apple pie. It's puppies and rainbows if people just read the darn bill and understand what's in it. Or maybe some people want the Federal Election Commission to be deadlocked, 3-3, when it should be an odd number so somebody can have a majority and win the thing, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. It's got to work. And so it's a very commonsensical approach. And any compromise legislatively, if the Senate would just vote for it, then we'd have a conference committee where we can work out the differences. But vote on the bill. We are entitled to a vote on a serious piece of legislation that's passed the House of Representatives twice. This is important to bring it up. It's essential to democracy. And I'm proud. It's called H.R. 1 for a reason. You don't give it the first number unless it's a good bill.
Do you think that they should change the filibuster if that's necessary?
I do. Filibuster reform is long overdue. I kind of like the Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington filibuster, where you literally have to about bust your bladder if you want to make a point. Tough it out. Don't file a piece of paper. People don't understand the filibuster is a technical thing. You send your staffer over with a piece of paper. That's not a filibuster. That's right. Ducking an essential vote. So if you really feel strongly about something, read the phone book on the floor of the Senate. Read the Bible. Read whatever you want to, but hold the floor. Strom Thurmond, I think, had the record for 24 hours, but the filibuster has mainly been used in recent times by racists. Let's admit the history here. We need to make sure that if you're talking a long time in the Senate, it should be for a good reason.
I like that. Make them work for it. Make them work for it. Congressman Jim Cooper, thank you so much for being here tonight. Please stay safe.